You're probably wondering why I have this mask. Well, it's the Halloween season. And technically this isn't really a horror mask, it's a Ishigo mask from Bleach. I only got this because, I'm into buying anime merch, so eventually I want to use it for a video, but yeah. But since this isn't about Bleach at all, I'm not going to be wearing it throughout the video. But I will be wearing this throughout the video, and throughout the many horror reviews I plan to do for this channel. And starting off, we're going to be talking about Re-Animator. Now, Re-Animator came out in 1985. It stars Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott, and in this film we follow a man named Dr. Herbert West, who is a new student in this university hospital, and he is obsessed with creating a serum that manages to bring the dead back to life. Only it doesn't go as well as planned. He tries it on a cat, and that doesn't go fully as planned either. So it's basically like Pet Sematary, except this was way before Pet Sematary, like 4 years before Pet Sematary. Now, of course, it's the start of October, and I will be reviewing a bunch of horror movies, not just ones in theaters, but also ones at home as well. And technically, the first horror movie I reviewed this month is Smile. I also want to review regular horror movies at home as well. And I'm starting off with Re-Animator. Why? Well, simple. Earlier this year, I met the man who played Herbert West, Jeffrey Combs, at GalaxyCon earlier this year. I got him to sign this poster, which marks Matthew, cat dead, details later, which is actually a line he says in the movie, minus the Matthew part. So yeah, it was really cool meeting him, and I'm glad that I met him, because he is great in this movie. Bruce Abbott is also great as well, and it actually had characters that I actually liked. Like, not just Herbert West, but the main protagonist as well, played by Bruce Abbott, who is planning to get married, and then stuff happens while West is there. Like, he stays with them, and then he kills his cat to study his experiment. And I'm just going to put it out there, there is going to be some spoilers in here, so I'm going to try my best not to spoil everything, just some of the details in here that I don't think are as important, but the movie was just so good that I watched it so many times that I am bound to talk about a few scenes in the movie. Now, when it comes to 80s horror, like, pretty much 80s horror is probably the best decade for horror, like, ever. Of course, there's The Shining, there's Nightmare on Elm Street, The Thing, The Fly, Hellraiser, which I will be watching the new Hellraiser movie, by the way, Child's Play, Friday the 13th, An American Werewolf in London. There's all these great 80s horror films, but one that I don't think gets as enough attention is Re-Animator, because Re-Animator, I think, is a classic in every single possible way. Oh yeah, also Evil Dead 1 and 2, I can't forget those movies as well. But really, what makes this movie very unique isn't just its concept, but it's the fact that it has some really entertaining pieces of dialogue and humor in here that managed to fit the movie, like, perfectly. Like, this movie doesn't always go serious. Like, there are serious moments, but this movie never manages to take itself too seriously. While watching this movie with the corpses and stuff, you would assume that it would be more like a zombie movie, but it's not really a zombie movie. It's more of an experiment gone wrong type of movie. It falls more into the sci-fi genre than it does the flat-out supernatural zombie thriller genre, because this movie just manages to be so entertaining in the best possible way, while also giving you a great concept that works in the best possible way. And what's also great about this movie is the effects, too. The effects, like, they are just spot on. Especially with the head of Dr. Hill. Like when, okay, again, spoiler, but it's on the poster, so you were bound to see it anyway. When Wes just, decapitates him and just uses his head as a science experiment, bringing his head back to life, and he talks very slowly. That happens throughout the last act of the movie, like the last, 30 minutes or so. And it was just so impressive, like, the way they got him to talk while also having his main body just walk around, like, completely headless. And there are some funny moments there as well, like when he's trying to sneak into the office while he has, like, a display head of, like, a half head. It was very funny. The movie manages to, entertain you in the most comedic and most horrific type of way, because even with its comedy, its horror is there. It manages to get very suspenseful and deeply disturbing too. Like, if you remember that one scene from Get Out where one guy is getting a brain transplant, but it goes horribly wrong because it was supposed to be the brain of the main guy. There's a scene in this movie that's similar to that, except it's not transplant, it's an experiment that he's showing to a bunch of other people. If that actually happened in real life with someone, I don't think I would be able to sell for that because it was very unsettling. It has a very unsettling amount of blood and gore, and it manages to be very effective, and it just looks so realistic, and more than most of the 80s horror films that manages to try and give it to you. Even some of the modern horror films don't, how most of them use CGI. Yeah, it looks more realistic than that. And if you came for this movie just for a lot of blood and gore and just crazy, corpses just trying to murder people, while it's not really a murder spree type of movie, it's more one that isn't all like in your face with the amount of crazy corpses that just they managed to bring back from the dead, especially towards the last act. The last act I thought was absolutely perfect, and the closing scene alone, I didn't think it could have ended more perfectly. And in the end, guys, Re-Animator to this day, after almost 40 years, just a few more years till it's 40 years, still holds up to this day. I've watched it ever since I was like 13, and it still doesn't get old. In fact, I feel like it gets better with each viewing. The movie is never boring, it's not very long, and the movie is just completely straightforward. It's about this scientist trying to create, this serum that causes people to come back from the dead, and this was before Pet Sematary, but it's an experience that's gone completely wrong. That's the best way I can put it. It's more of an experiment gone wrong type of movie, only it's in a much different concept, and it's in a concept that I think works in every single way. I think this is by far one of the most memorable 80s horror films out there. It's up there with all those other horror films that I mentioned. And I even like this more than some other classic horror films. I like it more than Hellraiser, Child's Play, Friday the 13th, while all great films. There was just something about this film that I feel like just managed to become such a great film years later. And Rick and Morty actually made a reference to this movie in season 5, I believe. Like Rick mentions Re-Animator serum or something like that. Rick and Morty just manages to do a lot. I haven't watched season 6 yet, but I will. But yeah, I really can't find any issues I have with this movie. It's just a near perfect horror film that I recommend for any 80s horror fan if you haven't seen it. It's one of my favorite horror films of that decade, and probably one of my favorite horror films ever. Well, this is just the beginning. There's a lot more horror films that I plan on reviewing. I plan on reviewing a lot more this Halloween than the past two, because I think I only reviewed one older horror film last year, which was for Carrie, but I have a lot more planned. So, yeah, stick around for that, and yeah, see you guys later. Word out.